Hi, I'm Mir, and today I'm here to talk a little bit about how I created my opening sequence, Scarlet. More specifically, how does it use or challenge conventions, and how does it represent social groups or issues? My product, Scarlet, is an opening sequence to a film which falls under the genre of psychological horrors, which is a subgenre which converges the conventions of horror and psychological fiction to target the audience's fear of madness, paranoia, guilt, and anxiety. The codes and conventions of this film genre entail realistic situations, fearful atmospheres, unstable characters, and subtle details, all of which were conventions I plan to exhibit in my film while simultaneously putting a touch of my own style on them. To tackle these conventions, I ensured my storyline and setting was minimalistic and made the viewer feel as if they could relate or feel as if they could too be a part of the narrative, hence, the setting of an intimate dinner at a significant other's house. For the fearful atmosphere, on the other hand, I knew I wanted a wrongful sense of security for the viewer in the beginning before stripping them off of that and rushing directly into a sequence of ominous shots, which would then reveal the dark nature of the actual situation. To achieve this, I utilized my actors' facial expressions to the most, with a heavy emphasis on smirks, eyes, body posture, and language. This really allowed the actors to take control of the narrative and feel comfortable in being the center of attention. I also allowed for the soundscape of my film to really do its thing here because I believed that sound is a huge part of such films and it really helped me encapsulate the feeling which I wanted to portray into my film. Now, because of the emphasis on body language, it is easy for the viewer to pick up on the instability of a main character. One special thing I'd like for people to note is that though there are two characters in the film, only one breaks the fourth wall and looks directly into the camera on various occasions across the film: the protagonist. This not only adds an eerie sense that she can see the audience and connect with them, but also just makes her instability a little bit more prominent as she stares into a vast nothingness. As for subtle details, which is another convention of this genre, it is evident that I tried to show many, with the props such as the flower garlands that the man puts on the character's wrist to show his devotion to her, as well as the massive knife that the character uses to cut up the meat and really, highlight her power. Furthermore, the traditional camera work included in these sorts of films are extreme close ups, distorted shots, low or high angle shots, and over the shoulder shots. Now, in terms of the camera work, I wanted to make sure that I took more of a traditional approach, taking heavy inspiration from my reference media. As you can see on my blog, I even attached images of the conventional shots from the reference media, specifically to show the viewers my approach and insight on my film. With an emphasis on extreme close ups, a back and forth sequence shot from behind a bubbling pot, and an abundance of ominous looks passed over the shoulder, I sincerely believe that my work has done justice to the traditional conventions of psychological horror films. Ultimately, the most interesting convention of this genre to me was always the sounds, and so I really wanted to emphasize the soundscape of my film with even the smallest of details not going unnoticed. The uneasy feeling from a creaky door to the sound of heels clicking on marble floors, and to the squirmy feeling from hearing meat being squished and the intense slamming of the knife. Progressively, as my film had a visual build-up, I wanted to ensure that there was an audio build-up too, from silent cricket noises to the loud smashing of the noise and a muffled scream being heard right before a jarring silence. This really made for a diverse soundscape, and the traditional conventions of the genre really helped me construct that and achieve my desired results. Coming to the maison scene, I knew I wanted the whole setting to be very inviting and intimate in terms of the lights and set design, as initially the premise is that of a date. Ultimately, that very setting would take an alarming turn as the situations turn into a threatening one, and the warm, inviting lights would go on to take a much different meaning. For costuming, I wanted a bit of my characters to show through their dressing, as well as to bring in a cultural element. I really wanted for my main character to be adorned in Desi traditional attire as a nod to my inspiration from the Pakistani series Churels, literally translating to witches. The women in the show are seen in abayas, which are made out to be a significant part of their identities throughout the show. I wanted to take a similar approach with the sari that my character is seen adorning. The colors for my film with the warm cinematic vibes were also definitely heavily influenced by the stylistic choices of the institution that I chose to research, A24. Moreover, another crucial element from psychological horror conventions which I used is the editing. Now, I knew the editing had to be really impactful, and I think that I truly achieved that. Techniques such as long takes, cuts, and speed of shots are all used meticulously to construct the most spine chilling reality in films, and that is the very effect I tried to achieve with cuts increasing in pace as the sequence builds up, and long tracking shots with focus mainly remaining on the eyes and the detailed sound design as well to help really tie everything together and make it into its own universe. So far, I've talked about all the things that I've taken inspiration from and the conventions that I've used. On the contrary, I also believe I challenge the traditional conventions of this genre, with the main way being through the inclusion of cultural elements, such as the costuming, which is something not seen in these films, as directors tend to focus on the mental and narrative elements more. The fact that my protagonist is a female, which is shown in a position of power as she demands the attention of the viewer, is also very against the conventions, as usually a male character is given this privilege to do so, and the women are shown as damsels in distress. This allows me to challenge gender based codes in this genre and to create more of an inclusive expression of my art. This part of my film was heavily influenced by my inspiration from Nenno's character from Girl from Nowhere, as well as Rosie's character from Talash. On the flip side, showcasing the male character in a vulnerable, endangered position in the sequence simultaneously challenges the conventions as well, and also increases the power which my main character holds, which is something I really wanted to highlight. In terms of representation of social groups, I wanted to make sure that the South Asian descent of my main character was showcased properly and highlighted. I achieved this by using her costuming with flower garlands, bangles, and the sari, which is a traditional South Asian attire. The inspiration to really highlight cultural elements came from the A24, the institution I research, as in all of their films there appears to be a significant cultural element which is highlighted, and it motivates me as a viewer to learn more about that culture, and I wanted my viewers to be impacted in a similar way. Likewise, the inspiration also came from the director I researched, Rima Kakti, whose work conventions I use in terms of deep storytelling, complex characters, visual aesthetics, and social commentary. Her emphasis on storytelling and connecting with your audience helped me really gather my ideas about the narrative and connect them with how my audience as viewers would be interpreting them.